Baja, California. One of the driest landscapes in North America, surrounds one of the richest seas on Earth. The largest animal ever to live comes here. So does one of the rarest. Whales seek out human touch. Entire coastlines glow in the dark. And in a land where life should struggle to exist, nature flourishes with astonishing abundance. How did a broken strip of desert become one of the most extraordinary ecosystems on the planet? To find out, we must cross 1,000 miles of wilderness hidden between two oceans. A mere 2 or 3 hour drive from the sprawling neon of Los Angeles, as the 2026 World Cup brings the eyes of the world to the host stadiums of Southern California. This metropolitan hub serves as a high-velocity portal into the Mexican peninsula. The atmosphere carries a frantic vibration. Thousands of vehicles choke the crossing lanes, while the scent of grilled street meat tangles with heavy exhaust. The city functions like a massive, restless engine, fueled by a constant stream of travelers seeking a departure from the familiar. It acts as a chaotic, high-energy filter where cultures collide and blend before the road stretches out toward the wild. Follow the concrete until the streets dissolve into sand and a striking sight emerges. A heavy barrier of weathered steel pillars marches across the beach. These rusted iron bars do not stop at the tide line. They continue their rigid path right into the crashing surf of the Pacific Ocean. The salt air has gnawed at the metal for decades, leaving a trail of orange decay against the blue water. The iron stands tall and corroded, yet the waves move through the gaps without the slightest resistance. birds ignore the structure entirely, gliding between territories on the ocean breeze. This steel represents a heavy attempt to divide a coast that remains physically unbroken. Beyond these pillars, the urban noise starts to drop away, making room for a highway that leads toward 1,000 miles of silence. Dust-choked paths wind through hills where massive granite boulders frame a startling pastoral scene. Against all logic, rows of vibrant green vines erupt from the white, sun-cracked earth. This valley produces 90% of all wine made in Mexico, an agricultural feat achieved in a region where rivers do not flow and rain remains a rare luxury. The flourishing greenery masks a geological secret buried dozens of feet or nearly 10 meters below the surface. Millions of years ago, this entire valley floor existed as the bottom of a prehistoric ocean. When the earth shifted and the water retreated, it left behind a dense legacy of minerals and salt deposits. To survive, these plants must engage in a brutal biological struggle, forcing their roots through the parched crust until they reach that ancient seabed. This struggle defines the harvest. Those who taste the local vintages often detect a subtle salinity on the tongue, a flavor that serves as a direct record of a sea that vanished long ago. The air here carries a crisp Mediterranean quality, moderating the intense heat found further inland. Sophisticated estates, constructed from local stone and reclaimed wood, stand quietly against the mountains, housing a world-class culinary culture that remains largely overlooked by the international masses. While these vines pull life from the salt of the past, the coast nearby prepares to release a different kind of ancient power, where the weight of the Pacific finds a violent outlet through a fracture in the stone. A rhythmic thunder echoes along the rugged coast, signaling a violent collision between liquid and air. Beneath the shoreline, the Pacific surges into a narrow submarine cavern, compressing trapped oxygen into a frantic state of high pressure. With nowhere else to go, the sea erupts upward in a sudden vertical blast of white foam, often reaching heights of 60 feet or nearly 20 meters. Rather than a geothermal geyser, this marine blowhole functions purely on the relentless energy of the tide. For generations, local families have lived within earshot of this hollow roar, treating the salt spray as a constant companion rather than a fleeting spectacle. They watch the ocean attempt to reclaim the land, one explosion at a time. The raw power at sea level provides a sharp contrast to the silent, frozen heights where the atmosphere thins and the desert heat completely vanishes. Space feels closer here, and the Earth reveals a different kind of endurance. The road ascends into a horizon that feels entirely misplaced. As elevation increases, the heavy, dusty weight of the lowlands thins out, replaced by a sharp and biting chill. The sun-scorched shrubs vanish, giving way to massive pine and fir trees that create a dense canopy of deep green. This high-altitude world functions as a cold island, isolated by thousands of square miles of parched terrain. In winter, several feet or over a meter of snow buries the granite peaks, transforming the landscape into a scene that mirrors northern latitudes rather than a Mexican peninsula. Among these frozen summits, the California condor patrols the air. With a wingspan reaching nearly 10 feet or 3 meters, these massive scavengers glide over the ridges on thermal currents, their silhouettes casting wide shadows across the ancient stone. This environment offers such clarity that humans have established a permanent foothold for looking into the cosmos. On the highest ridges sit the white domes of the National Astronomical Observatory. The air remains so dry and thin that stars do not flicker. They shine with a steady, piercing light. Scientists live in this quiet isolation to peer into the farthest reaches of the galaxy, taking advantage of a sky almost entirely free from the light pollution of civilization. At nearly 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters above sea level, the silence of the forest feels absolute. Huge granite boulders sit among the trees, weathered by centuries of ice and wind into smooth, imposing shapes. Descending from these celestial heights, the logic of the natural world begins to unravel. The trees no longer look like trees. And the earth itself seems to have been stacked by a giant hand into a landscape that looks less like a desert and more like a hallucination on another planet. The terrain fractures into a collection of massive granite boulders that defy the scale of the surrounding scrubland. These stones, some the size of multi-story buildings, sit in piles that suggest a deliberate, almost architectural arrangement. They are unnervingly smooth, devoid of the jagged edges typical of mountain rock. This surreal geometry resulted from molten magma cooling with agonizing slowness miles beneath the surface millions of years ago. As the softer soil above eroded, these solid cores finally met the air. Wind and sand acted as a relentless abrasive for millennia, peeling off the outer layers like an onion, until only the polished spheres remained scattered across the valley. Growing directly among these heavy stones are botanical anomalies that appear to belong to a prehistoric era. The boojum tree looks like an inverted white candle that has been melted and twisted into impossible shapes. Some reach 50 feet or 15 meters into the air, while others loop back toward the ground or spiral in chaotic circles. These plants can live for hundreds of years, surviving in areas where rain might not fall for an entire decade. To endure such scarcity, they have abandoned traditional leaves, instead evolving to absorb moisture directly from the heavy sea fogs that roll in from the coast. Sharing this space is the carden cactus, a massive species that can weigh as much as 25 tons, acting as a biological reservoir for the rare water that occasionally visits this parched earth. Even in this garden of giants, the land eventually runs out of color. Further south, the red and brown earth dissolves into a blinding geometric landscape where the very air begins to taste like salt, and the horizon disappears into a mirror of absolute white. The ground suddenly loses its grit, transforming into a blinding expanse of white that stretches to the very edge of the horizon. This sprawling field looks like snow, but the air carries the sharp mineral bite of an industrial salt operation rather than a winter chill. Thousands of acres are divided into massive rectangular basins where water stands so still it functions like a giant mirror for the sky. This site represents the largest salt production facility on the planet, powered entirely by the relentless solar energy of the region. Salt water from the nearby lagoons is pumped into shallow reservoirs, where the dry atmosphere and intense heat evaporate the liquid over several months. As the water vanishes, a heavy white crust forms on the bottom of the pond. Massive harvesting machines scrape the surface, loading the mineral into trucks equipped with tires over 8 feet or 2.4 meters tall. These vehicles transport millions of tons of salt to the port annually, destined for global markets. Walking near the rim of these ponds creates an intense sensory experience as the light reflects off the white floor with nearly overwhelming strength. The wind never stops blowing in from the coast, carrying a fine mist of salt that coats every surface. This world of sharp geometric lines and brilliant surfaces feels disconnected from the brown desert nearby. Yet, just past these industrial shores, the salt-heavy water transitions into a nursery for the ocean's most legendary travelers, where creatures of immense power seek out something far more delicate than the minerals underfoot. The calm, warm water of this lagoon serves as the final untouched nursery for the Pacific grey whale. For centuries, these leviathans lived in a state of war with humanity. 19th century whalers nicknamed them devil fish, because a mother would readily smash a wooden boat to splinters to protect her calf from a harpoon. The relationship was defined by violence and fear until a single afternoon in 1972 changed the biological trajectory of the species. A local fisherman named Pachico Mayoral was drifting in his small wooden craft when a massive scarred head rose from the depths. Instead of rowing for his life, he did something illogical. He reached out and touched the animal. That moment of contact dissolved generations of fear. Today, the descendants of those whales do not flee from the sound of engines. They seek them out. It has become common for a 40-ton mother to use her snout to gently nudge her newborn calf toward the side of a boat, encouraging a human hand to make contact. A palm pressing against their skin meets a surface that feels like wet, smooth rubber, heavily textured by the hard, grey crust of parasitic barnacles. The whales often lift their heads entirely out of the water, rotating their massive eyes to look directly at the people sitting just inches away. Scientists find no biological reward for this behavior, as the animals receive no food or protection. It appears to be a genuine, cross-species curiosity passed down from mother to calf. While these giants share their secrets in the shallows, the jagged canyons looming over the desert floor hold a far older record of life, etched into the stone by a culture that vanished long before the first sails appeared on the horizon. Deep in the fractured canyons of the Central Mountains, the rock faces carry a silent audience that has watched the desert for 7 millennia. These vertical walls act as a massive prehistoric canvas for murals made from pulverized red and black minerals. Mixed with local plant juices to survive the passage of time, the paintings depict deer and mountain lions leaping across the stone. Yet the most jarring images remain the human figures. These painted men and women stand over 10 feet or 3 meters tall, their arms raised in rigid ritualistic poses toward the sky. The placement of these figures creates a profound geographical mystery. They occupy ledges high up the sheer cliffs, appearing to hover in positions that seem impossible to reach without modern equipment. When Spanish missionaries first penetrated these remote gorges in the 1700s, the sheer scale of the art led them to a startling conclusion. They believed only a race of giants could have reached such heights to record their history. The local inhabitants fueled these legends with stories of massive beings from an older world. But the reality involved the Cochimi people utilizing complex scaffolding made from the trunks of local palm trees. These caves functioned as sacred galleries where the act of painting served as a bridge to the spiritual realm. The parched desert atmosphere has acted as a natural preservative for over 7,000 years, keeping the colors vibrant enough to look fresh. Reaching these sites requires a grueling journey on mules through terrain that offers no shade and little mercy. Yet, the path out of these sun-bleached mountains leads toward a valley where the brown earth suddenly gives way to a sight that feels like a hallucination. A hidden supply of fresh water emerges from the floor of the desert, creating a lush corridor where the heat of the peninsula finally meets its match. A dense canopy of dark green date palms erupts from the valley floor, marking the site of a subterranean mystery that has sustained life for centuries. This forest thrives on a relentless supply of fresh water, surging from deep beneath the Earth's crust, filling a vast lake and feeding a river that pulses through the parched landscape. The air sheds its dusty weight at the edge of the grove, turning cool and humid in direct defiance of the scorching heat just yards away. In the heart of this green world stands a mission constructed from dark volcanic stone. Completed in 1786, the church features thick black walls that create a startling visual contrast against the vibrant palm fronds. The heavy masonry serves a functional purpose, trapping the cool night air to provide relief, even when the summer sun is at its peak. Throughout the town, the sound of running water remains constant as it flows through narrow stone channels designed hundreds of years ago to irrigate local crops. These palms, introduced by Spanish settlers over 3 centuries ago, have matured into a permanent sanctuary that feels entirely disconnected from the surrounding dust. Mulega follows a similar logic of survival further toward the coast. A freshwater river winds through a deep gorge, flanked by miles of vegetation that seem impossible in such an arid latitude. This reliable water source allowed agriculture to flourish, creating a stable environment where a community could grow without total dependence on the outside world. The shadow of the canopy provides a constant shield from the glare of the peninsula, creating a quiet, rhythmic existence centered around the riverbank. As the lush greenery fades at the coast, the red mountains of the interior make a final dramatic stand against a body of water that holds a scale of life found nowhere else on Earth. What happens when these jagged peaks finally collapse into the deepest trenches of the sea? Loreto serves as the historical anchor of the peninsula. Established in 1697 at the base of the Sierra de la Giganta, these jagged red peaks descend directly into the salt water, creating a narrow strip of habitable land where early settlers first negotiated with the peninsula's uncompromising conditions. This village functioned as the original capital of the Californias, a place where humans learned to harvest the scarce fresh water flowing from the canyons and build with the heavy volcanic stone of the interior. For decades, the only link to the outside world was the sea, as the mountains formed a wall that defied most attempts at land travel. The proximity of these massive summits to the shore created a unique marine environment. Just miles from the beach, the seafloor drops into deep underwater trenches that become a winter refuge for the blue whale. Encountering the largest animal to ever inhabit our planet forces a total recalibration of biological scale. These leviathans grow to over 100 feet or 30 meters and can weigh as much as 150 tons, exceeding the size of any dinosaur discovered in the fossil record. A massive spray of water shooting 30 feet or 9 meters into the air marks their arrival, followed by the emergence of a mottled gray back that seems to stretch indefinitely through the waves. Every organ functions at a Titan scale, with hearts the size of a car and tongues that weigh as much as an entire elephant. These giants move with a slow, rhythmic grace that belies their enormous mass. As the tail flukes eventually rise and slide silently back into the abyss, the ocean returns to a calm that masks the presence of another, far more elusive resident lurking in the northern reaches. How can a sea capable of housing such giants also be the final refuge for a creature so small it has almost become a myth? The northernmost reaches of the Gulf Harbor, a presence so fleeting it has become the ocean's most haunting ghost. The Vaquita marina, the smallest porpoise on Earth, exists only in this narrow corner of the world. Measuring a mere 1.5 meters or 5 feet, these creatures possess dark, ringed eyes and a compact frame that allows them to vanish into the silt-heavy water at the slightest vibration. They do not leap or play. Instead, they surface for a fraction of a second to draw a single breath before retreating back into the absolute silence of the depths. Their disappearance is not the result of a direct hunt, but a tragic collateral consequence of an illegal trade. Beneath the surface, invisible walls of nylon mesh known as gill nets are set to capture the totoaba, a fish whose swim bladder is valued higher than gold on the black market. The vaquita, sharing these same shallow waters, becomes entangled in these silent traps, unable to reach the air. With their numbers now reduced to a final dwindling handful, they have become a phantom species. While this tragedy unfolds in the murky north, the coastline further south opens into a sanctuary of crystalline stillness, where the water seems to have forgotten how to move. Can the desert find a way to trap the sea in a state of permanent turquoise glass? The Sea of Cortez reaches inland here, forming a curved sanctuary shielded by the massive red ridges of the Sierra de la Giganta. These parallel mountain walls act as a permanent barrier against the prevailing winds of the open Gulf, resulting in a series of hidden coves where the water enters a state of absolute glass-like stillness. Without the interference of waves, the bay reveals its contours with startling clarity. Light penetrates through 40 feet or 12 meters of liquid, illuminating the white sand and volcanic stones on the floor as if they were displayed in a museum gallery. The color of the sea undergoes a constant rhythmic shift. It begins as a pale turquoise in the shallows before darkening into a deep, saturated navy at the center of the bay. In these micro-environments, time feels secondary to the landscape. A kayak or a small boat moving across the surface appears to float in a void of blue air, casting a sharp shadow onto the seabed below. This region remains a rare pocket of the peninsula where the desert's silence is mirrored perfectly by the water. The bay extends for over 20 miles or 32 kilometers, creating a corridor of tranquility that seems immune to the chaos of the open ocean. Further north, this heavy stillness is replaced by a massive, pulsing energy where the sea does not just sit, it vanishes. The boundary between land and water in the northern Gulf remains in a state of constant, fluid redesign. In San Felipe, the sea engages in a massive, twice-daily retreat that exposes nearly 3 miles or 5 kilometers of the ocean floor. As the tide pulls back, the water appears to vanish entirely, leaving behind a vast expanse of rippled sand that reflects the sky like a liquid mirror. This extreme displacement results from the unique funnel-like geometry of the upper Gulf of California. When the massive volume of the Pacific Ocean pushes into this narrowing corridor, the energy is amplified, creating tidal shifts that rank among the most dramatic in the world. Boats that were floating in deep water just hours prior suddenly sit stranded on the parched sand, leaning at odd angles while waiting for the return of the surf. Local life revolves around this rhythmic disappearance as the exposed seabed becomes a temporary territory of damp mud and salt-heavy air. The horizon itself feels untethered, shifting miles away before surging back with relentless force. While the tides of the north rely on the heavy pull of the moon to move the water, a different kind of propulsion gathers strength in the southern reaches. Beneath the surface, thousands of silver bodies are preparing to break the boundary of the ocean and take flight. The ocean surface suddenly erupts into a chaotic display of silver and shadow. Thousands of mobular rays, also known as monk's devil rays, gather in shoals so dense they span several acres of the sea. From a drone's perspective, the school looks like a dark, shifting carpet draped over the turquoise depths. These creatures glide just beneath the waves, like a moving cloud, until individual rays begin to launch themselves into the air with startling force. A single ray can fly as high as 3 or 4 feet, or nearly 1.2 meters above the surface, flapping its wing-like fins before crashing back down, flat on its stomach. When thousands of rays perform this maneuver simultaneously, the acoustic environment undergoes a total transformation. The impact creates a loud and continuous popping noise that echoes across the water, sounding like a stadium full of people clapping in unison. The energy is frantic and relentless, turning the bay into a churning cauldron of movement. Marine biologists continue to debate the specific purpose of this acrobatic display. Some researchers suggest the heavy slap against the water helps to dislodge stubborn parasites from their skin. Others believe it functions as a sophisticated form of long-distance communication or a complex mating ritual designed to attract a partner. It might even serve no biological purpose other than pure social interaction. The spectacle often lasts for hours, with the rays moving as a single coordinated organism across the bay. Once the frenzy subsides, the water returns to its original stillness, leaving only a few lingering ripples. This concentration of life represents the immense productivity of the Gulf, where nutrients draw in giants from every corner of the Pacific. A short journey toward the sheltered capital reveals a different kind of titan, one that carries a galaxy on its back and thrives in the quietest corners of the harbor. What happens when the largest fish on Earth decides to share the shallows with a city that translates to peace? Jacques Cousteau identified the Sea of Cortez as the world's aquarium, and the city of La Paz functions as its grand lobby. The name translates to peace, reflecting the tranquil nature of a harbor sheltered from the volatile open ocean. Along the coastal walkway, massive murals depict the marine life that defines the region, but the true spectacle exists just beyond the urban shoreline. In the shallow, nutrient-rich waters of the bay, massive shadows glide beneath the surface. These are whale sharks, the largest fish in the sea, reaching lengths of nearly 40 feet or 12 meters. Their dark grey skin carries a specific pattern of white spots and vertical lines, creating a visual effect that resembles a dense field of stars in a distant galaxy. No two sharks possess the same markings, allowing each individual to be identified as they return to Nung waters year sau year. For those seeking more than a view from the deck, the bay offers one of the ocean's most humbling encounters. Sliding into the water allows a person to glide truck-tiep alongside Nung titans as they feed. Floating inches away from a shark the size of a city bus shifts one's entire understanding of scale. Every slow, powerful sweep of its tail moves a massive volume of water. Yet the animal remains entirely unhurried. They pose no threat, often ignoring the humans suspended in the blue while they continue their rhythmic patrol through the plankton-rich currents. Further out, the uninhabited ridges of Isla Espiritu Santo rise from the Gulf. Layers of volcanic rock have been pushed up from the seabed over millions of years, creating rust-red cliffs that drop vertically into water of a bright electric blue. At the northern islets, a permanent colony of hundreds of sea lions occupies the stones. The younger pups often descend into the water to investigate visitors, twisting and spiraling through the waves with the curiosity and speed of puppies. As night falls, the light remains in a different form. Every movement in the dark water causes the sea to erupt in a sharp, neon blue glow. This bioluminescence occurs when millions of microscopic organisms called dinoflagellates are disturbed, triggering a chemical reaction that produces cold light. Every splash, and every footstep in the shallows leaves a glowing trail, turning the dark ocean into a moving display of light. While these wonders define the harbor, the survival of this entire ecosystem relies on a specific group of people who have learned that the greatest wealth of the sea comes not from what they take, but from what they leave behind. The people of Baja possess a grit forged by the same brutal forces that shaped the land. For generations, local fishermen have operated in these volatile waters, navigating deep trenches and unpredictable currents that can pull a vessel miles off course in minutes. They are masters of a high-stakes environment, diving into depths where visibility vanishes and apex predators patrol the shadows. This endurance has recently shifted from a legacy of extraction toward a new era of stewardship. Many who once relied on the spear and the net have transformed into specialized guides, protecting the very reefs they once harvested. In the north, the physical reward for this labor is found in the simple stalls of Ensenada. Here, the daily catch is transformed into the iconic fish taco, a culinary staple that serves as a direct link between the cold Pacific and the vibrant culture of the peninsula. This humble meal represents a deep reliance on a healthy ocean, a realization that spurred a radical transformation at a remote coastal reef. What happens when a community decides to stop taking from the sea and instead lets the water heal itself? Near the Eastern Cape, a coastal reef exists that was once on the verge of biological collapse. Decades of heavy fishing had left the seafloor nearly empty. In 1995, the local community initiated a radical experiment, choosing to halt all extraction and transform their territory into a sanctuary. This decision triggered a marine explosion that continues to stun the scientific world. Within 20 years, the total mass of fish increased by 460%, turning the reef into a dense vertical city of scales and fins. The most overwhelming spectacle remains the jackfish tornado. Thousands of silver-bodied fish congregate in a massive rotating column that can reach heights of 60 feet or 18 meters. Divers entering this vortex find themselves in a world of rhythmic motion, where the sunlight is eclipsed by a wall of living muscle. The sound beneath the surface is a low, continuous hum of thousands of tails beating in unison, a vibration that resonates in the chest of anyone nearby. This concentration of energy has lured apex predators back from the deep. Scalloped hammerhead sharks glide through the peripheral currents, their specialized heads scanning the sand for the faint electrical pulses of buried prey. They move with a quiet, calculated authority, reclaiming a kingdom that was almost lost. This sight represents the ultimate realization of what the peninsula can become when the pressure of the outside world is removed. The water here doesn't just hold life, it radiates with a frantic, unyielding energy. Leaving the frantic energy of the reef behind, the land narrows into a sharp, jagged edge where the solid earth simply runs out of room. Does the Earth have a breaking point, or is this where two oceans simply decide to tear the map apart? At this southernmost coordinate, two massive bodies of water collide with a violent energy. The restless Pacific Ocean hits the shore with a heavy force, while the more sheltered waters of the Sea of Cortez push back from the east. This meeting point represents the end of a 1,000-mile trek and the physical remain of a massive geological upheaval. Deep ruptures in the Earth's crust, driven by the same tectonic forces that pulled the peninsula away from the mainland, created these isolated stone stacks rising from the surf. Tectonics set the stage, but the waves sculpted the final form. Because currents from two different oceans converge here, their power is amplified. They have spent thousands of years pounding against the rock, seeking out the most fragile layers. This relentless erosion carved deep tunnels into the base of a once solid headland. Over time, these cavities expanded and finally broke through to the other side, leaving the hollow arch known as El Arco, standing alone in the sea. The granite resists the water, but the sea continues its work, reshaping the coast with every surge. Beyond these final rocks, the sea floor drops thousands of feet into a dark trench, and the land vanishes entirely. The desert, the mountains, and the ancient canyons have all led to this single point of geological collapse. As the road stops and the solid earth fails, only the open ocean remains. "1,000 miles of dust and deep blue now lie behind us. From the rusted northern metal to the churning currents of the Arch, this peninsula persists as a masterpiece of biological and geological friction. Baja California remains a world apart, where the desert heat and the ocean's wealth continue an eternal, uneasy negotiation. The wilderness waits. Explore the strange,